as Greg said, we don't like to introduce you. It's easier for you to introduce yourself. And we don't often have people that sit here and say when they were young that they knew they wanted to be an entrepreneur. So it'd be really cool to hear what you thought you were going to be when you were younger, to start us off.
Yeah, so hey everyone, how's it going? Good evening, how are you? I have had a full day of wine touring at Waiheke, so if I'm definitely buzzed, it's for a good reason. So leverage this and ask questions, because this is like open book, like it's going to be awesome.
Anything today.
Yeah,
so
and I do realize I have a funny accent. I'm just going to put it out there. Everyone's told me that, so you're going to have to deal with it. It's water, not water. That's what I figured. Yeah, so what I wanted to be when I was young actually was to be a corporate lawyer, believe it or not. And mostly because my mom told me that you're really good at arguing and talking back, so maybe you should be a lawyer. And I said, sounds like an idea. And then I really quickly realized that, oh my gosh, as a corporate lawyer, you're just going to be buried behind paperwork the entire time, and it wasn't the type of thing I wanted to do. And then now, I just realize how I treat our lawyers, and I'm like, oh, good God, thank God I'm not one of them. So that's the reason why I'm glad I'm not doing it. Trust me, I don't abuse lawyers, but I'm sure we all have our general sort of sentiment against them. It's just like, I literally got a bill from our lawyers a few weeks ago, and I emailed them to rush them on a document. They billed me $130 just to reply to the email of me rushing them. And this is why people don't like you. There's a reason. Anyways, all right, sorry. Okay, so that's what I wanted to be growing up. Yeah, okay.
And do you remember if you had a first sort of business idea, or did you first stumble across, did you have a lemonade stand when you were young? Did you sell stuff when you were at school?
Yeah, so like the Kiwis now, I'm working on it. Because my tour guide was Molly, and she kept on going, yeah, and I'm like, fuck, that sounds so cool. I'm going, yeah, the entire time. So I didn't have a lemonade stand per se. My story is quite accelerated, if you can call it that. I didn't really like the pace of the schooling and education that I went through, so I ended up skipping a bunch of grades. So I skipped grades 2, 7, 9, and 11, and then I went to uni when I was 14. I was playing a ton of Counter-Strike when I was younger. Does anyone here? Yeah, there's enough nerds here. Yesterday at the Unfiltered event, there was like one dude who was like, yeah, shoot people in the face. And I was like, yeah, no, I did that a lot. And in video games. And then, so I was playing a lot of Counter-Strike. And if you're playing online, you have these things called clans, which are online multiplayer teams. And as a clan, you end up having an insignia, a really cool looking banner that you put on your server, and ours was awful. And then the clan leader was like, hey Brian, you want to design one? And I said, okay, cool. So I proceeded to pirate Photoshop, because you can't afford it at 11 years old. It was an $800 piece of software back then. And then I started to learn how to design. So I was designing stuff, and mainly I was designing things to make my book reports look really good, make the teachers realize that the content didn't really matter, it's just how pretty it was, and then they would give me a good grade. But then quickly there were folks who were like, oh, you can design, like, do you want to like build a site for us, or like do whatever, build a logo and do the yearbook or whatever, and then pay me for it. And I was like, this is great. So I started making money off of that. So the first enterprise, I would say, was me selling off my design skills for money. And then eventually one of my friends in uni was like, hey, when I was 14, he was like, hey, you can design, I can code, so why don't we start building websites together? So we created a web design agency. We called it a design consultancy, because when you call it a consultancy, you can charge 10 times more, right? You're consulting. I was like, strategy of design, yeah, and then charge them more. But I'm kidding. I mean, most of it, you guys realize it, because it's all in your head. You've already spent time learning it. Obviously, there's value in that. So it's not just the design, not the output. It's the thought process behind it. So that was my first business, was doing web design. So that's what got me into tech and got me into the design space. And then I did that throughout uni, and then I graduated in 2009. And it was then that I realized that Vancouver, so I grew up in Vancouver from Canada, woo, yeah! Don't you guys care about Canada? Not really, 'cause it's honestly just the same here and prettier, and the weather is just as weird. But yeah, I grew up in Vancouver, and we have the same queen, right? We're equally as excited about the royal wedding, yeah? Okay? And Meghan Markle wrote an article about how awesome New Zealand and South Islands were or whatever, and it's all over the press. But anywho, so I grew up there, but then I realized that Canada, the country has 35 million people or something, and then California has like 37 million people, right? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to go to Cali, and I didn't realize what Silicon Valley was all about. I had never been to California, so I said, let me go down. I bought a one-way ticket, and I started to just immerse myself, because like, what is Silicon Valley? Is it like a valley with like silicon chips all over or whatever? I needed to know. And then I realized it was like just nerdtopia. Everyone's a huge nerd, and I started to reach out to everyone, like people. I didn't know anyone. I mean, many of you probably go, well, I don't have a network and whatever. I'm sure you fly to America and go, I have no one, I don't know anyone. It doesn't matter. I just emailed everyone. I just guessed everyone's emails, and then I just kind of was not humble in the email, right? I was like, what was it 18-year-old university graduate, or I called myself an 18-year-old wonderkind. I actually called myself that because I wanted to catch people's attention. And then sure enough, a lot of people responded, and they were like, okay, let's meet up, And I ended up getting a job at Digg, digg.com. Some of you remember that as a lot like Reddit. Digg, unfortunately, didn't win the race. Reddit did, and then I ended up getting a job at Digg. So that's how I got to Silicon Valley in the first place.
And with obviously this confidence and this go-getter attitude, you still went to university, and would you go again, like with hindsight? What did you learn from your life and upbringing and personality versus the university and your time at business school?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of debate, and this question came up yesterday as well from Jake. It was just like, I was at Unfiltered live yesterday. Would you recommend people to do college and complete it? And I do think there's still a lot of merit in finishing college, like our uni. I believe that as a generation, like I'm 27 now, I'm a bit old, but the younger folks, it's just like a lot of this dynamic of I want to drop out, this is too restrictive, whatever. But we honestly have the worst reputation of just ditching shit in the middle, right? It's just like, oh, this is not going to make me $1 billion, fuck it. And then you go to the next thing. It's true, and honestly, overnight successes take years. Yeah. And I think even in uni, it's like, at least you finish what you started. So graduating with
the process itself, perhaps.
The process is very maturing, because you realize, oh, what am I good at? Yeah. What are my limits, which you can learn through university? And what other subjects can I learn that have nothing to do with what I'm studying today? So for me, I did a commerce degree. We call it commerce in Vancouver too, which is great, because in America, no one knows what the fuck that means. They're just like, commerce. It's like business. We call it business. So I did marketing, which arguably my parents told me was the most useless degree I could ever get, which is true. But for those of you who did marketing, it's awesome, right? Like, I did it, and like the gender ratio was like 90% female, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. But I was way too young to hit on any of them anyways, but whatever, it was fun. So I did marketing, and then I did a minor in political science, which was like, people were like, what? Why are you doing political science? That's weird. But to be honest, it was actually one of the most fascinating subjects that I ever took, and it was because poli-sci is less about government, more about a study of power, and in business it's all about power, and it was really great to understand these concepts on the philosophy side and beyond. So that's what I ended up taking. So I think uni is a great place to do these things. There's almost a naivete about not doing it and assuming that they can just pick up everything just by learning and doing, which is partially true, but there is, unfortunately, within business, and I'm sure many of you recognize, there is a lot of lingo that you pick up by just taking business school, and if you don't speak the same lingo, you're not in the club, which is unfortunate today, but it still will be the case. It'll continue to persist, and at least you learn that through a controlled environment. So I do advocate for folks to finish school. It's a small chunk of your life, but immediately afterwards, don't end up sinking more time into some random sort of MBA or whatever. like in my book, actually, there's a chapter which really is a bit unsettling. It's called "Screw the MBA," and then I ended up speaking at my alma mater at the MBA school, and they were like, Brian, tell me about this chapter that says, screw the MBA. I'm like, oh, fuck. And I was like, well, listen, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm actually saying don't do it for the wrong reasons, right? Because a lot of folks just go, oh, I'm lost. I don't have any direction in life. Let's do an MBA, right? And it's like, the MBA is not gonna answer every question in your life. This is not one of those panaceas. You have to end up doing your own thing and then realizing what you want to do. And the MBA is a great place to sort of strengthen your business knowledge and build a great network. But it isn't one of those places where you can just go there and all of a sudden all of your problems will be solved, right? This is not one of those things. So, anyways.
Awesome. Cool.
Sorry if you're doing MBA. I'm really sorry.
So one of the I was reading an article about you today, and it was an interview around your startups and jobs, and your time at Dig came up, and it sounds like you probably learned some lessons there as well through their process and their successes and challenges. And there was a sentence in there that was saying it was the restructure that made you realize you wanted to be a business owner. And I think that's a really challenging process to go through. I don't know if anyone's been through that themselves, and you have a lot of empathy for business owners and founders when you have those and face those challenges. What exactly made you think, yep, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, many of us, I'm sure, from this spark, there's usually like a moment in time that just makes you decide, like, maybe it is a good idea to own my own company. And partially at Dig, I mentioned I got laid off, and at the ripe old age of 19, right? And it's like, that kind of sucks. And you know what was really unfortunate is, there's a very big difference, as you guys know, between getting laid off and getting fired, right? Fired is you did something stupid. Getting laid off is just that the company didn't financially figure its shit out and couldn't afford to pay your salary, which, by the way, I was like the lowest paid dude. I was like, you can't even afford, what the fuck? Whatever. But what was happening was it kind of triggered something in my mind, which was, wow, I am now paying for mistakes that I never made, right? It was someone else who made them. But if I were to start my own company, perhaps not only am I in control of everything, not only do I end up paying for my own mistakes, which I'd rather do, and I'd rather benefit from all the successes that I'm able to contribute to. So I wanted to be able to experience the entire spectrum of successes and failures. And that's the type of control you have when you're a business owner, but it is a massive amount of pressure because there literally is no one to blame. I always tell people, it's just like, okay, as a CEO, as a founder, you literally have no one to point fingers at. No one. You have no person to point fingers at. It's all you. And in fact, that's the number one lesson. And I find this really funny because a lot of founders believe, well, my CMO fucked up or this person fucked up. That is an extremely poor way to handle this situation. If you have to understand, even if they fucked up, it's still your responsibility because you hired them, right? And so you need to recognize and acknowledge mistakes and then absorb them and then try to make it right. And that is the number one lesson I learned as a founder that matures you, which is no matter what people do who are in your team, you hold responsibility. The last thing you want to do is point fingers because that just really doesn't make you look good.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So tell me about your current business.
So I started the company Kiip in 2010, and the premise of it was very simple, which was, so I was on a flight, I was walking up and down the aisles. It's a great place to do market research when you're on a plane, right? You can see people on their phones, you can see what they're doing. I realized that most people were playing games and they were pretending to work, right? And it was very obvious to me that mobile gaming was a huge sort of activity pool that we could tap into. And as a marketer, right, I studied marketing. I had a fascination with advertising. I said, well, what, and I mentioned I did design, right? So I said, well, the ads in these experiences, like I don't think any of us, even now in 2018, has ever looked at an app or on your phone and seen an ad and went, woo, let me tap on that shit on purpose. Like no one gives a fuck, right? Honestly, most ads suck, right? You have to admit it. And so for me, I was like, this is really annoying. This is really unfortunate. How can something be this ubiquitous but be so hated? And so the mission was simple. What if we created an ad that wasn't even an ad? What if it was actually something completely different and we decided to turn the ad into a reward? So the idea of Kiip is simple. Let's just replace the ad with a reward and have it sponsored by a brand. So you finish a run, you could have a reward sponsored by Gatorade, or a reward sponsored by some fitness brand. So for us, it was a matter of taking the context, pairing it with the right brand, and rewarding people. So that's how Kiip started. I'm happy to report, 8 years later, it's exactly the same concept. We didn't radically pivot. The company's expanded, of course. The concept of rewarding the moment is more of an idea of building loyalty and creating an advertising benefit. We now have 10,000 apps that use the SDK. In fact, we have a New Zealand company that you might have heard of that are based in, I think, Wellington or whatever. It's called Pickpock Games. They build a lot of really popular games. We're one of their top monetization partners, so we're very, very happy about New Zealand in general, because we're making a lot of money from that company. But the whole point is, and they make a lot of money too, so it's great. I'm not sure, has Mario, the GM, has he ever spoken here? You guys heard of him? He's a great dude, he's great. But he's not here, he's not based here, unfortunately. But anywho, so we monetize apps, we help them make money. It's really hard today to make money as an app developer. You can do a lot of in-app purchases, or you can just put in ads, but ads in general, like you guys have realized, ruins the user experience. So creating something more unique, like rewarding someone, is a big deal. So that's how we ended up growing the business.
Awesome. So just to focus in on those early steps for the people that are thinking about starting a startup. So you were on that flight and you saw this opportunity and it frustrated you. What happened next? How did you get from that moment to having a startup?
Fantastic question, I think. So how many of you know how to code? Put up your hand. Okay, how many of you know how to design? It could be in Canva or anything, Adobe, whatever. Okay, cool. I truly believe that you need to pick at least one kind of builder skill, right? Something where you can actually create. Because for me, the first thing I did wasn't write a long-ass business plan, which, by the way, is the worst fucking thing you can ever do, because no one's gonna have the attention span to read your stupid shit. But what you need to do is design something or build something with your coding experience, because guess what? People are highly visual, right? They're highly, even now, more so than ever before, because we're so schizophrenic. So many ideas, so many things. It's like, how do I get it? Just show them a super sexy design. So what I did was I mocked up a fake version of the reward in an app. I coded it with my very limited front-end development skills, and you could put in an email to claim the reward, and it would the link to submit would go nowhere, right? But the idea was just to show people this is what it is, and can you get it in 15 seconds or less? And the answer was yes. So luckily, that was the first thing I did. So I went around, started to gauge the idea with brands, and I know that there's both a very popular and very dangerous perception of fake it till you make it, right? But the idea is fake it till you make it in a way where you actually have something that can deliver over time. For me, I had a product that was still a mock-up, but at least when I showed the brands, they went, wow, this could actually deliver, and maybe we can buy in and believe in you. And then in the early days, you have to understand, no one is buying into the integrity or the stability of your product at all, right? Because obviously what you're doing is very beta, you had very limited investment, it might have been just sweat equity, but what you're showing them is that you have the propensity as a human being to follow through and actually make it a core, strong product. So for me, it was like showing people, listen, I have this thing, I will follow through, do you believe in me? So I definitely leveraged nepotism to get ahead, because the first two investors we had, by the way, was the CMO of Vitamin Water and the CMO of Pop Chips, which is a very popular chips brand in the US. And guess who our first two customers were? Vitamin Water and Pop Chips. So it was a matter of you definitely want to use nepotism, and that's the best way, because yeah, they're believing in you as you, not just your product, but what you want to do is not screw it up, right? If they believe in you and they start wanting to be your customer, that first chance, right? You don't want to mess that up. If you do, you have to start from scratch and you have to rebuild your reputation, which sucks. So luckily we didn't mess it up, and that ended up being our first few steps forward.
And you have, to say you've been successful in raising capital is probably the understatement of the century. Can you chat to us a little bit about how you approached that? You talked about the cold emails before. Was it as simple as that, or how did you create that story and sell them that dream?
So how many of you have already raised angel investment or venture capital? Put up your hand. Not a lot of you. So, and how many of you want to raise venture capital or angel investment? Okay, cool. The way I would describe this is it's really funny. A lot of folks come into the process and go, wow, angels, ooh, angels. And then VC's like, oh, my God, like they're so rich and they have money. Like, fuck it. You know, it doesn't matter. They're still human beings. And in fact, you are the ones who are letting them in, right? You're letting them have the privilege of buying into your idea. So that's the perspective you should come into the process with. Unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs come in and go, wow, they have money, they're like so smart. But in reality, they're fucking stupid at the end of the day. It's not, I mean, I don't want to be mean, but a lot of them are just like mile wide, inch deep. That's their job. In general, they're intelligent people. I don't want to insult them, but in general, their jobs are to be not as smart deeply in one topic, but smart across the board. So the one cardinal sin I find with folks is they'll talk to a VC, they'll go, yeah, I don't like that. You have to do this and that and change it, blah blah. And they all sound like that. And there's this like, and they're like, and then they're like, okay, we're, and then they scramble backwards to their team and go, oh shit, this VC said this, we have to change it. And they come back and they're like, oh, we're still not into it or whatever. And then you screwed yourself. Bottom line is this, like, realize you have your vision, you have your execution. Stay core to that. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Unless you really get like 30 no's in a row and people going, this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Then you actually have to listen to yourself. But at the end of the day, you know your business best because you've put your heart and soul and tears and sweat into this thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So that's the first sort of attitude. But to raise money is simple. It's a track record of execution. I've almost never, ever in my life seen someone come into a fresh, cold meeting with a VC and end up raising money. Very, very rare. If you hear these exceptions, it's mostly because the entrepreneur has a huge reputation from a prior exit or is very well known or has a lot of things going for them. But if you're relatively unknown or you're unproven, that's fine. What you're doing is when you first establish a relationship with them, you immediately subscribe them to your email newsletter. And what you do, and I shit you not, is you start emailing them monthly updates. And again, you're not asking them for money. You guys have heard of the famous philosopher T-Pain and the line, if you ask for money, you get advice, and you ask for advice, you get money, right? So the idea is, I think it was Ludacris, not T-Pain, one of the famous philosophers of our time. But the idea is, you don't ask them for money at all, ever, because it's just really weird when someone asks you for money. You want to make it about something more subtle, which is, can you help me? Can you be helpful to me? If anything, any human being, just not just VCs, want to feel like they can help you, right? If they don't feel like they can help you, they don't want to be a part of it. So they need that ego boost to be like, oh wow, I can really help this person, da 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 da. But when you get them on the email newsletter, what do you do? What do you send them? It's your execution update. It's like, we just executed this way. We have this many customers. We launched our prototype. We did this press release, da da da. And you literally hit them month by month by month by month. At some point, their guard will be broken down. They'll be like, oh fuck, this person's so good at executing. I feel like I'm gonna miss out if I don't invest in them, right? So what happens is then you go to them at some point, and this is the magic words. You guys ready for this? Hello, so-and-so old white man who is a VC, because they're most likely old white men, is, we have been executing, and we're building, and we're about to launch or some type of huge event, and we've had so much inbound interest, we can't hold off too much longer, say that, right? We have so much inbound interest, we can't hold off too much longer. I'd like to talk to you about seeing if you can get involved, because I really enjoyed our conversations in the past, and I really think you could be very helpful to us growing in this next stage. That's literally the phrase, and mark my words, it's like magic, right? Because it's FOMO wrapped into a sentence, right? And they go, oh my god, shit, like there's other people want to invest in them, blah, blah, blah. Fuck, we have to do this, and then they'll be like, okay, we'll meet tomorrow, like, let's have lunch or whatever, and you'll be like, yeah, well, you know, like, I just want to make sure it's the right terms, I want to make sure you're the right VC, and then the best thing to do, by the way, and I really hope there's no VCs in the audience because they're going to hate me for this, but the best line to ask them is like, do you have any references you can give me, so other entrepreneurs you've invested in, just so I have an idea of how you're like when you're with them? They'll be like, what the fuck? Right? But it's the best turning the tables on them, because they'll go, oh, well, you know, we've done a great job with this portfolio investment, and we helped them do this and that, and you go, yeah, I don't know. I've had a bunch of other VCs who are very specialized in the hospitality space, because we're trying to pursue that. Like, well, we've had these portfolio companies in the hospitality space, and blah, 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 blah. And you go, yeah. So you want them to prove to you that they're worthy to invest in you. And again, please don't take all of these things the wrong way. The way I'm expressing it. I'm not trying to make you a super cocky asshole. What I'm saying is, there's an attitude and a mindset to go into the process where you don't get trampled on, where your psyche doesn't get destroyed, and you have the confidence moving forward to continue building your business. Because at the end of the day, like I said, they're there to enable you. They're your partner. They're not the ones who dictate your business. You're the one who knows what the fuck you're doing. That's the truth. And the problem is, unfortunately, a lot of the entrepreneurs I've met feel like the VCs know what they're doing, which is almost never the case. They just lightning struck, and they just happened to make a couple good investments, and then now they're the biggest, baddest motherfuckers alive, which is not the way things should work. So, there we go. Hopefully that works. Good luck.
I'm going to skip ahead and then come back. You obviously are very charismatic, and you are very naturally a great storyteller. How do you, as you've talked previously around your superpowers and your superheroes and addressing what you have that is better than what other people have, and how do you, two parts, can you teach charisma? And can you teach a non-salesy, natural, quiet Kiwi personality, looking at a stereotype, to do this? And second question, how do you identify what your own superpower here is?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I do believe, so people always ask, why do you seem so natural on stage? And then also going by stereotypes, I do realize this, I'm like an skinny Asian dude, right? And I look like I'm 13. And most initial perceptions are like, this guy is gonna be really good at math, he's gonna be very quiet, he's gonna work really hard, and he's gonna have glasses, which I do. And it's really surprising to folks when I open my mouth and they go, holy fuck. First of all, he doesn't have an accent. I do here, yeah, I know. But he seems quite well-spoken, and he can carry himself well. None of this is an accident, so I always explain to folks, when I was younger, I actually used to do this thing called speech arts. So my parents put me into this thing where you literally recite poetry in front of adjudicators, and you had to memorize Shakespeare, and it's ridiculous. But it was a way, and my mom was worried that I would take on her accent. So she came from Hong Kong, which is why I look like this. But she was worried that I would have her accent, so she put me into this program where I didn't have that problem, and I would literally speak in front of large audiences. This is how I felt comfortable. So there is no accident there, but it's all practice, right? So no one is natural in front of people. It's very natural to be nervous, but after you've done it, at this point, probably thousands of times, you're gonna feel very comfortable, because this is like having a conversation with people. So I encourage you to just start somewhere. It's not normal for anyone to be natural in front of groups. It's just a normal thing to be nervous and to be reserved. So that's the first. So I don't think charisma is something you're born with. You definitely can be taught it. And it comes from spending some time being on stage and being natural in front of groups. I also have to address so you mentioned the sort of quiet Kiwi stereotype. As a Canadian, it's the same thing, right? We're also very humble. We don't like to make a big deal out of things, right? Because Canadians are just whatever, life is great, we have a great country, we're happy, we have free healthcare. Why would we want anything else? Why do we want to create $1 billion company? We have everything we want. And I'm assuming it's similar here. It's a very conservative economy. Banks don't really want to fund anything risky, because why would they? Things have been great. But this is where America comes to play. I don't know if you guys love spending time with Americans, but I do. And the reason why I do is because you'll learn one big thing from them, and they're really, really good at basically patting themselves on the back on pretty much fucking anything. So what happens is, they'll be like, we just won some random fucking award we just invented for ourselves, and they'll tweet it in, and they'll put it in their blog, and they'll yell from the rooftops, we just won those top 10 companies in our block. And it's and we're the #1 in the next 2 days. And it's it's a thing about Americans that I actually really admire, is they're just really good at lauding themselves with successes. But this is actually a good thing. You know why? Because it establishes this momentum. It's just almost like jinxing yourself into thinking that you're successful, which success begets success. And if you're able to convince yourself that you are, at some point you will believe it, and it's just just messing with your own head, right? And Americans are really, really, really good at that, right? You guys have obviously noticed this. So if you can immerse yourself, find all the Americans in Auckland and try to spend some time with them because they're really good at that. Or go to America and figure that out. So that's what I learned when I spent, I spent 10 years in America now. So that's a really big deal. So I think that's the type of dynamic that you have to take. And I will also say though, that charisma and being well spoken is not going to come in the same form with everyone. And yes, my version is I'm bombastic and I'm loud and I'm in your face, and yes, I make crazy facial expressions and people find that really entertaining. But it's not that with everyone. Some folks are about sort of this quiet, sort of almost contemplative, almost genius, where if they say something, you're like, wow, this person knows something that I don't know, and this is crazy, I should listen to them. So it comes in many forms, is all I'm saying. So don't think you have to be the loud, charismatic, sort of stereotypical, blah, blah, blah. So that's the first. And so you ask about superpowers. So in my book, there's this cheat code, which is know your superpower, which is very simple, which is the idea of energy allocation efficiency, which is just about taking something you know you're really good at and spending your time strengthening that rather than putting all your energy and trying to fix your weaknesses. Like, for me, growing up, I already knew what I wasn't going to be good at, right? Like, going through, and when we go through school, of course, when we get B's or C's, we're called Asians, not Besians, right? So if I get a B, like my parents immediately throw me into tutoring. I used a joke yesterday if you were there and unfiltered, so I have to repeat it. But the idea is, I always just sucked ass at like calculus and anything math related, which is really hard to believe, but I just really didn't do great at that. And then I just knew that if I were to spend all my energy trying to make myself a calculus expert, that would be a huge waste of time. But I know what I'm really good at, and I'm really good at getting people super excited, super rallied around something, even though it's like the dumbest idea. I just want to get them super jazzed, because that's just what I do. And all of a sudden, that's what I realized was my strength, and I would spend my time really sharpening that. And I do that every day now with my employees, my investors, my prospective customers, and current customers, you name it. So for you, I think it's really important to find that superpower. All of you have one. Mark my words, all of you have one. It doesn't have to be related to your job. My superpower isn't like I'm awesome at mobile advertising. Like it isn't one of my superpower is complementary to it. So many of you might have superpowers that are complementary to what you do. And it might be everything from I'm really good at visualizing things, I'm really good at building things with my hands, I'm really good at sort of noticing patterns, I'm really good at explaining things in a very simple way where everyone can understand it. These are all superpowers that you can just leverage every single day as you're doing your job, and that's something you have to make sure you spend time really polishing. It's really, really important to do that.
Awesome. So back to the company and your team, because people are everything. Who did you bring on first, and what were their superpowers?
Yeah, so luckily we had very complementary superpowers. So I will tell all of you who have co-founders who are starting a company, and I don't want to make any of you feel really bad, but if any of you in a co-founding team have a lot of overlapping superpowers, where you all have the same skills, it's a bad sign. Because unfortunately, there isn't this immediate trust in that person. Just, you handle that, I'll handle that, da-da-da. So I had two co-founders. One was Courtney and Amadeus. They have awesome names. They're both dudes. And Courtney was the back-end developer, and Amadeus was awesome at design. And like I mentioned, I used to do design, right? So I thought I was pretty decent at design, but then I met Amadeus, and I'm like, well, fuck, like your shit is way better than mine, so like you do it. So I'll take the businessy stuff, and I'll be like that guy. And so we ended up being very complementary in that way. By the way, you know how you know you have very overlapping superpowers? Is if any of you in an early stage startup with co-founders, one of them is a CMO or a chief strategy officer, you are doomed. That person will end up leaving. If you have a chief strategy officer in the first 6 months of running a startup, you're fucked, because that person's useless. So the idea is you want to make sure you have complementary superpowers where you all have your lanes and you swim in those lanes. So it's very important. So I think it's really important that when you bring on folks, again, they're complementary. And by the way, I just want to be very clear. Do not start a company with your best friend. Because at some point, you're going to have to choose between the company or your friendship, and guess what's going to win out? It's going to be the company. I'm very sorry. That's what happened. So I'm just going to save you a lot of pain, and just don't do that. So that's a really important thing. The first hire I recommend all of you is to hire literally a jack of all trades or a Jill of all trades. In fact, our first jack of all trades, his name was Jack, and happened to be great. And he was doing everything from taking out the trash and depositing checks to putting together marketing materials to pitching reporters. I mean, he was literally doing everything, inputting shit in Salesforce. It was awesome. And this person is going to be extremely comfortable with ambiguity. That's really the main hallmark of this individual. And for many of you, the same thing is the case. You want to find someone who is extremely comfortable with ambiguity. But unfortunately, this Jack is only going to last a few years. Because at some point as your company scales, you're going to have to find specialists. And Jack, unfortunately, isn't a specialist. And guess what? If you make Jack do something specializing, he's going to feel punished. So you will lose these people naturally. And this is something that I wasn't ready for. Because at year 3 or 4 or something, we had like 20% of the company leave essentially overnight. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm like the worst human being ever. This sucks, I can't even retain my own staff. But then I realized it was because a lot of them were generalists and they're very comfortable doing a lot of these random tasks, and when you immediately put them in one lane, they'll start hating it. So hopefully that helps in how you understand how you're going to hire your early employees.
You now have teams all over the world. Do you have New Zealand on your radar?
Not right now, no.
Cool, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
I guess the culture question I want to dig in a bit more, and hiring people. Do you have you have a head of people, or you have a head of?
We have a head of HR, correct?
Yep. Yeah. And are you still involved in that decision-making process?
Sort of. So there's only so much you can do when you're trying to scale the hiring process. But in the early days, I'd say at least in the first 4 or 5 years of the company, if you're under 100 staff, you as the CEO/co-founder should be meeting everyone during the interview process, because you are making sure that everyone is checking off that culture box. And usually for me near the end, it was just I would just have a chat, right? We'd just have a phone call if I wasn't in town, or we'd meet up really quickly for coffee. And basically the number one thing I was looking for was, do you have the personality to jive with the rest of the staff? And you'll figure it out quite quickly. And if they don't be afraid to just say, I don't think you're gonna be successful here. And it isn't because they're not capable. It isn't because they're a bad person. It's just that culturally, from a personality standpoint, they just won't be able to succeed in the environment that you've created. So the most important thing to realize is that as co-founders, you are the culture. Right? You are the culture insofar as how you end up deciding or making patterns of decision making, right? I can break down culture. It's how do you just make decisions in a repeated fashion, and how do you respond to crises? And people will watch you when you do that, and they will mirror that or emulate that in the way that they deal with crises or make decisions. And that is how culture permeates. It's not super scientific, it's very simple. It's just how do you do it. And by the way, the worst thing you can do is to break pattern. So all of a sudden, if you freak out, have a nervous breakdown, or you start just having an anxiety attack, you're fucked, because all of a sudden your staff is now going like, how is this person going to be able to handle any future stress situation because they just cracked? And that's the ultimate pressure you deal with as a founder. It's not easy. Mentally, it is one of the most difficult things you're ever going to do in your life, because people are relying on you to be able to just be like, we're going to go that way. And then as a founder, you're just like, I don't even know if that's the right way, but we're just going to go there. And I'm going to make it work. And you guys have to believe in me. And you have to believe in the fact that, for me, at some point now, there's 130 people in the company, and 130 people and their families are riding with me during this direction. And fuck, we could just go kaputs, and all of a sudden people don't have jobs and they have kids and all this shit. So it's really hard on you mentally, because you go, oh my God, they are trusting a random 27-year-old Asian kid to make a lot of decisions, and that is really terrifying. But I trust in myself that over 8 years I've made patterns of decisions that have led to success, and I will continue to rely on that gut read as I move forward and make decisions.
Awesome. Looking out at your industry, what's really exciting you about the advertising, or more specifically ad tech space?
Yeah, so the thing about ads is that it's everywhere, right? Ads touch billions of people every single day. Ads, to a lot of entrepreneurs and engineers, are entirely unexciting, right? People go, well, why would I put my energy into ads? It's like, why? I'd rather use my energy to fucking make solar panels and like save lives and like do cancer shit. But bottom line is, I actually think ads are so powerful because we do influence so much. And we have that FaceTime with a lot of people, but like Spider-Man's uncle once said, with great power comes great responsibility. So as an advertiser, you have a lot of responsibility to influence culture, to create cultural norms, really, and to make people realize that certain things are acceptable or normal, whatever, and that you don't abuse people's trust. So I think what happened, and you guys have obviously heard of the whole Cambridge Analytica Facebook issue. We have GDPR coming in now as privacy regulation from the EU. There's a lot of stuff happening because guess what? The bar was set so low, honestly, because advertisers, we suck, right? Honestly, we come in, you know what we love doing? We love guessing. We love going like, let me like just leer around a corner, observe you, guess what you are, what you like, not even just fucking ask you, which is it's really annoying. It's like your friend going, I think you really like that, I think this and that. It's like, just fucking ask me, right? And like, honestly, this is the issue with advertisers, is that we've been so used to guessing for so long. It's a shitty situation. So why I'm excited is there's a new era of advertising that is coming, which is this idea of engagement-based, permissioned ads. At the end of the day, you have to recognize brands are a part of our lives every day. We use brands when we blow our nose, when we shower, when we brush our teeth, when we drink something. Brands are there. You cannot get rid of that. But brands need to be a part of your lives in a helpful way, in an additive way. And that's really been our model through that rewards-based mechanism I mentioned earlier. So I think 8 years later, I mean, this is where, sort of just this marathon on a sprint type dynamic comes through. 8 years later, people are like, oh yeah, maybe ads should be additive. And I'm like, yeah, I fucking said that 8 years ago, but okay. And then all of a sudden people go, oh my God, I want to do this shit. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. It's been a long time, but thank you. And so I think this is what's exciting, is that the bar was so low that anything you do that isn't shitty is going to be great. And that's why industries like that are actually great places to start in, is if the bar is so low, things are so manual and not digital. If you come in as a tech company and disrupt it and just make shit digital, life is going to be awesome.
Super easy.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Just like that.
And what's next for you guys? Like what's next on the radar? What new technology or new...
Blockchain. I knew you guys were like, when the fuck is he gonna say that? I can take a shot because it's a drinking game. Blockchain. So no shit, we actually are. I'm sorry. To be very honest, I was very hesitant to jump on the bandwagon, right? Because all of this is bandwagon hopping stuff where it's like, the folks are like, we're now AI and VR and AR and then blockchain and like all this hot, tech shit. And I was like, fuck. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? Yeah, because we are in rewards. We are all about unique engagement and looking at sort of this people-based way to advertise. It's extremely relevant to adopt blockchain technology because naturally that is how the immutable ledger is going to be effective, is creating transparency, security, this idea that ads do require transparency and there's not a lot of that right now. Can we implement that? So we are, currently we've launched already our first blockchain-based ad campaign, which basically just means that the way the ads are served, the campaign data, the success of it is going to be written to the same ledger on-chain, on Ethereum, so that the advertiser and the agency have access to the same file and being able to reconcile and understand how things are going. So very basic ways to implement it, and it's been highly successful so far. We're very excited about it. So I implore you, if you are thinking about a technology like blockchain, don't just be like going to me like, blockchain, like actually say, hey, I'm here to give you practical, real world use cases of a technology that you've probably heard is extremely sort of fluffy and really hyped, but really has a lot of merit. Because I do fundamentally believe that advertising and blockchain together is an inevitability. It's just one of those things. Same as how finance and blockchain is going to be an inevitability. It's just one of those things that's going to happen. It is very early days, but it's an opportunity for you to get into it and actually create these real world use cases, and that's going to make you stand out. I always tell folks, it's just like, if you hear a lot of this noise from everyone, you actually can use that to your advantage, which is to be the only person that isn't the one just spouting a bunch of bullshit. It's not that hard. Like I said, the bar is very low. If you actually do something that has impact and has real world use cases, can speak about it in English, and people can understand you, you are already way ahead of the pack. And that to us was the number one use case and why we decided to do what we did in blockchain.
Awesome. What's the biggest risk to your business at the moment? What's keeping you up at night?
It is the big giants in the ad world. It is Facebook. It is Google. It is folks who do have massive scale, because in the ad world, some of you who are in this space realize it's very binary. You either have millions of people, billions of people you can reach, and then nothing, and you're new and cool and novel, and there's really not a lot of places to be successful in the middle. So we're trying to figure out how to build a model where we do have access to billions of people, and we aren't compromised as a business. We have strategies where we are implementing that, so we aren't effectively disintermediated or become irrelevant. So there are a lot of risks, but honestly, you know, again, and I'm not trying to say we're getting cocky or overconfident, because I do believe there are things that are going to put ourselves out of business, including blockchain, by the way, which is why we were like, why don't we just get ahead of that and just do it ourselves? Because, you know, you guys have probably followed a lot of what Gary Vee says, and yes, a lot of what he says is a lot of BS, but a lot of stuff he says is very legit, which is shit like, wake up every morning and think about how you're going to put yourself out of business, and do those things. And it's scary, but you have to confront those truths and attempt to be ahead of them. And that's honestly how you can stay relevant, and that's what we've decided to do. But yeah, at some point, maybe consolidation and M&A is an option. Maybe at some point we're gonna have to pivot, whatever. But this is why being an entrepreneur is so exciting. You're literally staring into the abyss and chewing on glass, right? You just have no idea what the fuck is going on, and you have to feel comfortable with that unknown. But it drives me, and I hope it drives you, and that's why we're all psychotic, right? Because you're literally sitting there going, I have no idea what's gonna happen, and I could be out of business tomorrow, and I could be hit by a bus, and the whole business could get, you know, fucked, but it's all great, and life is awesome. So deal with it.
And have you had to have many changes or a different communication to clients around data in the last couple of months?
Yeah, GDPR has been a hell of a shit show. I'm really sorry, but the Europeans are so fucking paranoid, it's really annoying. And to be honest, they were very draconian in their approach, and I think too draconian in a way that is going to restrict commerce, because to be honest, the reason why you have these seamless web experiences, and I'm sure you all realize this, is because there's a seamless sharing of data, and today it's now all opt-in. Like, you literally have to say, I want it, before they even do it, which I don't even think most people understand enough about the internet to realize that shit happens. Like, try to explain to your grandmother that, hey, so there's cookies that then know what you like, and they're like, what the fuck? Like, you know, it's just not gonna happen with the older generation. So I do hope that the newer generations talk some sense into the EU regulators, and some of these things are repealed or changed. That is my hope. But yes, because we're good corporate citizens, and we don't want to get fined 11 million euros, by the way, which is a minimum fucking fine. We are telling people, yes, we love opt-in, and yes, please follow this, and and they go, yeah, whatever. And you know what's crazy? I don't know if you guys realize this is GDPR. A EU citizen could be, like, Greg, are you still a EU citizen? No, or you're not, because UK, Brexit, whatever the fuck. But if you were, you could literally be in New Zealand, and because of GDPR, you could say, I don't want my data to be stored, and that company has to figure out how to delete your shit in perpetuity. So it doesn't actually just apply in Europe. And it literally is anyone who's an EU citizen outside of Europe. It's crazy. It's absolutely bananas. And I'm going, how the fuck are you going to implement that? It's impossible in some cases. And by the way, guess what? Just let's talk about blockchain for a second. Blockchain is by nature anti-GDPR. You know why? It's an immutable ledger. So if you engage with something like Ethereum or Bitcoin, and your records of selling shit are on there, you can't delete that data. It's immutable. So like the whole blockchain thing is fucked by GDPR as well. So I just think a lot of this stuff makes no sense. It's just a lot of EU regulators that are 75 and didn't fucking understand any of this and needs to figure out how to deal with it. And I'll be very blunt. There is a middle ground. I mean, GDPR is in 20 on the 24th, right now. Shit, tomorrow. Well, here your guys are like 2 days ahead, so like in 48 hours is going to be in place, because you live in the future. Is that will be implemented? So it's crazy. It literally is happening right now. And just so you know how we're reacting to it, we're actually just pulling out of Europe. Actually, like we just made the decision. We made the executive decision that it was too risky to do business within Europe with all these uncertainties. And luckily, because only like 2 or 3% of our revenues is out of Europe, we decided to pull out for now. We do intend to go back, but we really hope that some of these changes end up evening out. So sorry for my harsh words. If you are European, you do value privacy. I value it too. I'm not saying you don't deserve it. I think it is a right. But there is a middle ground, and I just don't think we've arrived there.
Cool. All right, so we've had a lot of successes, and I'd like to talk about the other side of that, the challenges. You've touched on quite an emotional nerve there, but perhaps as on a more daily basis, with a startup, you're going to see a lot of blockers, there's a lot of no's, there's a lot of like emotional roller coaster days, and you generally when you start out in small teams or by yourself. So how are you facing no's, and how do you move forward and maintain that confidence and that total you're on the right track when people are saying you're not?
So how many of you got rejected today? Just put up your hand. Just someone said no to something you asked for. Just put up your hand. Next time I come here, I want all of you to put up your hand. And the reason is, it is a very good thing to get rejected, even if it's a Tinder date. Trust me. The idea is because you want to get in the habit of asking enough, wanting to push the envelope enough. I always tell my salespeople, I was like, listen, if you don't get like 10 no's in a day, you don't deserve, like you need to ask enough where you are getting rejected all the time. And as an entrepreneur, you need to be very comfortable with getting rejected. You want to get kicked in the shins. It is part of the game, because you are inevitably going to run into people who will think, no, I don't think this is going to happen, not possible, blah, blah, blah. But because guess what? It's so easy for someone to say no. It's honestly the laziest thing they could ever do, because no means I don't have to do anything. There's no effort required. So you need to recognize this. Okay, this person's a fucking lazy shit. Because they don't want to say yes, they don't want to do any work. But if you actually decide to convince them that they should be putting in that work, it's a huge win. So that is one of the biggest things I've had to deal with just building the company. I think in general, many of you recognize it isn't for everyone, right? I know this sounds very cliche, but it isn't. It was glamorized, it was sexy for a while. I need you to recognize it really isn't. I mean, it is one of the most, if I could be raw and vulnerable to you for a second, I'm here on the other side of the planet. I'm in New Zealand, right? I'm 14 hours away from pretty much fucking anything. And the point is, my life is still just overtaken by work, right? You guys have way too awesome internet and LTE because no one's using it. And the thing is, it's just like there's too much that I'm constantly being bombarded by my work, because guess what? It's all here. Because I'm never going to escape it, because my company is always going to be here. So for those of you who are looking to getting into it, you are signing up to be perpetually a slave to your business, where you could be at dinner with the most gorgeous, most amazing, most beautiful woman on the planet, and you'd be like, oh fuck, did I send that email? And it sucks, and you can never relax. You know, I was at Waiheke and I'm drinking wine, and I was sort of relaxed for a second, and I go, shit, did I send that fucking thing? And it's like, you'll always be reminded. It's impossible to get out of it. Are you ready for that? You will always be immersed. You will always be a slave to your own business. You have to be ready for that. And that is the mental tax that it takes on you. And if you're not ready to do that, you should just not. Because honestly, I'd rather save you the trouble and not create all this anxiety and mental potential ill effects, and eventually be someone who's at least mentally stable. I do write in the book a few things that help you deal with it. So for example, I talk about mind space, this idea of taking mini vacations, of going on random day trips, and being by yourself, which is very important. So I went to Waiheke by myself, right? And because I just wanted to get drunk and just look at the scenery and not give a fuck about shit for a while and get rained on. It was awesome. And by the way, now I'm mentally super refreshed and I feel good. It will only last maybe a few weeks and then shit will rain on me again. But that's just what we signed up for. But I really hope you realize that you do need that mind space. If you constantly bombard yourself day by day and you do that whole hustle thing, right? Like the whole thing, it's dangerous, very dangerous. You will burn out. You will break down. You will take drugs. You might even be suicidal. I've had friends in San Francisco, in the Valley, and in LA take their own lives. It is a very serious issue. Don't ever get to that point. Be super good at introspection and listening to yourself. If you do feel at some point that you are going to burn out, that you can't take it anymore, eject. Take some time off, right? Go do what you need to do to relax. Find that activity that helps you escape. Everyone has that. By the way, you know what mine is? It's skiing. I love skiing, which I will come back in August and ski the shit out of the South Islands. And the reason why I love it is because what? When you're skiing, you literally can only think about skiing, because if you don't, you will die. So it's great. So find a behavior and an activity like that where literally, if you don't think about it, you will die. So golf is not gonna work, by the way, because you can think of all sorts of shit when you're golfing. You need shit where you literally will die if you don't think about it. That is one of the best things you can do. Why do you think entrepreneurs love like kite surfing, all these fucking cliche ones in Silicon Valley? Because you will die if you don't think about kite surfing in the moment. So, anyways, hopefully that's helpful.
I love the concept of a community, and New Zealand is obviously a little earlier in the ecosystem process, but I think you touched on it before around the passing the knowledge on and investing or supporting or mentoring. Do you have any mentors that you're thankful for, or how did you get that knowledge? And how can we foster that in a newer ecosystem in New Zealand?
I have to quickly just give you guys a history view. Why did Silicon Valley become Silicon Valley? There's a couple key things, obviously, but one of the main things, by the way, is open source. Open source originated from Silicon Valley. This idea of putting all your code on GitHub and people just, whatever, fuck it, right? You know, when Elon Musk was like, hey, just look at our patents, fuck it, you know, I'm just gonna give you everything that, you know, whatever. The reason why that fostered so much healthy collaboration within Silicon Valley, it wasn't about this. It wasn't about like, I own this intellectual property and I'm gonna hide it from you and you can't have it or whatever. And that's extremely dangerous when it comes to creating a culture of sharing and mentorship and helping, because there's a couple attitudes you can go at it, by the way. The first attitude would be, yeah, I wanna help you, I don't care all the, you know, I'm just here to be the most helpful I can to you, and I'm not trying to be protected. The second attitude is like, well, I'm a little reserved, you could fuck me over, and it's very sort of defensive and very sort of protective. All I have to tell you is ditch that. That is the only way to create a culture where people help each other in the most selfless way. And what goes around does come around, because again, the sign of wealth in Silicon Valley isn't the Lamborghini you drive or the apartment you own, it's the number of angel investments you have. To be honest, it's true. Like, literally, people boast about their angel investments as if it's the mansion they have in the Hamptons or the Lambo they're driving, which is how they do it in New York. So I hope it's going to be similar here. It's great, because if the way you show your wealth is the number of angel investments you make, that's really healthy, because you are helping other entrepreneurs succeed. So that's hopefully one way you can develop the culture here. And yes, like I said, because you are 14 hours away from really fucking anyone, realize that you are your own ecosystem. You are a microcosm, but a microcosm where you are extremely tech enabled. You have a culture of communication and sharing, which I've seen, and you're very nice to each other, and it's very Canadian that way, and you should use that to your advantage, and you should help each other. It's a big deal. Don't be protective, and bring back your wealth and success, right? So for me, I've invested in 7 Canadian companies. I didn't have to, but I wanted to. Similar for you, if you go off and you make a ton of money in somewhere else, but in Australia or in the US or whatever, come back and try to invest at home, because that's the only way this community will continue to grow.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. I think I'm going to stop there because it's been a long time. Who has questions and who wants to start? Yes. You have to yell. You have to yell really loudly. Yeah. Also, just before we start this, we do have this amazing book to give away. And Brian's going to choose the best question at the end and give you the book for it. So
it's signed and I've kissed it, so.
Yeah, you promise.
Hey, thanks for the awesome talk. I want to touch on ambiguity, because that's something that's kind of relevant to my life at the moment, because I'm doing a role where it is quite ambiguous. If you could, I guess, drill down your approach, what would be your approach to ambiguity? How do you kind of distill it and make decisions and trade-offs?
It's all about kind of just picking something and going with it, and then learning from the data you get back in a very quick way. I always like to say that if you have the right data, if it's available readily, that tells you if your decision is good or bad, you're probably too late. So feel comfortable knowing that when you make that decision, it's unknown, and you're making data as you go. You are creating your own pool of knowledge, which is really important. Being self-guided and autonomous is really important, obviously. You have to set your own agenda and make shit up. Like for me, in the beginning, it was just like, let me make up my own metrics, let me make up my own shit, let me see what is going to be my direction, because it's just what I decide. And that's honestly the best way to do it. Ambiguity is extremely liberating, right? You know that there's so many things you can do. It also could be paralyzing, right? So you just literally have to pick one and just put all your energy into it, because if you don't put all your energy into it, you're gonna regret it. And that's kind of how I've looked at a lot of these decisions, especially in moments where it is extremely ambiguous.
Yep, at the front.
Oh.
Hi. So I work at Chile. We're a startup accelerator, and we're always working with startups to test and try and get their MVP out. What were some of the things that you tried in the early days, and how do you do that now? Like, how do you test products, and are you still involved in that at this stage, or is it just the team?
Yeah, I think, like I was mentioning earlier, you just push things out, and we structurally do it now in our growth teams. We have scrums where we have engineers and BD folks and marketing folks together pushing out products. We have a couple key data points we look for that if it doesn't prove itself within a certain period of time, sometimes you decide, do I want results in 3 months, 6 months, a year? And then you give it time to mature, and then if you don't see those results, then cut your losses and move on. It's really that simple. But the key mistake you might make is if you don't give it enough time to percolate. And that's honestly not a science, it's really an art. You have to just be, does it feel right, whatever, did we give enough time? And that's where you train your gut as a founder. You go, listen, I don't think we've given enough time. I truly believe this could be X, Y, Z. And that's honestly the best way to do it. There really is no formula, but that's how we've done it when it comes to testing things.
Am I allowed to ask you more than one question?
Do first and ask for forgiveness later. If you were playing it right, you really asked 3 questions and just said, "Fuck it, sorry guys."
Okay, cool. I was
Oh wow, she wrote it down on paper. Jesus Christ.
No, I was like thinking about
Okay, just go.
Okay, the first one is like, how do you test your idea? And so, for example, you have your MVP. Like, how do you test your idea, and how did you find your audience, and who do you send those questions to?
Easy. Guess their email, tell them that you have this product, do they want it, is it going to solve their problem, and then see if they're willing to buy in. And you may not even have to build it yet. Like, so for me, I was asking brands like, hey, would you want a better mobile ad product that rewards people, They go, this sounds like a really good idea. Okay, awesome, let's build it.
So pretty much you find your potential customers and you go ask them.
Exactly.
Cool. My second question is, like, how many times do you fail in the past? And could you please share with us some of you, like, the best feelings, like, in the past, and then what did you learn from it?
First of all, the F word is banned at the company because it's not a failure. It's a very lucky opportunity to learn. I always tell people, if you made a mistake, it's fine, as long as you don't make it twice, then you're an idiot. So learn from your mistakes, and it's honestly the most visceral way to realize an impact of something that you might have made a mistake on. So that's the first. But failure-wise, or mistakes-wise, or lucky opportunities to learn-wise for us, like it's been countless. I can't even count on my hands anymore. A lot of the initial sort of mistakes I made was not listening to my gut. I will tell you as an entrepreneur, every single time you don't listen to your gut, you will be wrong 100% of the time. For me, I remember this. You would hire people, you know how you hire someone, you go, they're really good at what they do, but you know what, fuck, they're kind of annoying. You just fucked yourself, because you made a mistake by doing that, just hands down. It'll 100% always be the case. You always want to follow your gut, and especially in hiring people, like, this person's awesome, I can tell that they're gonna be great, da-da-da. That's gonna be what you wanna listen to, and that will save you a lot of time. Don't ever compromise. Just because someone's super smart, smarts can be taught, knowledge can be taught, personality and fit cannot be taught, and that's why you have to follow your gut on that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. One last question. I know you bought your own books today, but apart from your own books, do you have any other books that you can recommend for people who's like at the really beginning of a startup process?
Yeah, I don't think, honestly, reading about startups is kind of like reading a book to learn how to ride a bike. It's just like, there's only so many things you can do, you just have to fucking do it. So I don't recommend reading any startup books, to be honest with you. I recommend reading books that give you a perspective on human nature. Because as a founder, what your job is to create products that appeal to humans, and because they're going to be the people who buy your shit. Like, at the end of the day, human beings buy your shit. This is how it works. Robots don't buy your shit yet, right? So that's why you have to understand people. So the best books I've read on that, there's a book called Predictably Irrational by an author named Dan Ariely. I highly recommend that. It's a great one-on-one on behavioral economics, which is a subject matter that teaches you the real irrational nature of economics, which is, basically contrarian to the whole Adam Smith invisible hand thing. Not everyone makes decisions based on just self-benefit. There's other things that they do, and this is a book that really outlines that, so that's the first. The second book, many of you probably heard of it, it's probably very popular here, called Sapiens. I love it, it's awesome. Yes, it is written by an Israeli doctor who's super biased, and I'm sure is trying to indoctrinate you with his ideas, but it's a great thing to be indoctrinated by, because he essentially explains why humans, or sapiens, our species, became the dominant species. It explains a lot of the reason why humans became the way that they are, which is really helpful in understanding the history of our people. The third book is a book called Meditations by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Now, obviously it wasn't him writing it that got translated, someone else translated it, but it was really him writing memos to himself, and then they put it into this book. And it's a great way of trying to create a mindset of understanding suffering and failure. As a Roman emperor, obviously had to deal with a lot of shit, and he basically tells you how to deal with it. And it's all his musings, and it's really fascinating, and I highly recommend that book. So,
have you read the follow-up to Sapiens?
Pardon?
Have you read the follow-up to Sapiens?
No. What's the name?
Homo Deus.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to. But
awesome. It's about the future. Yeah.
Oh, the future. Okay,
yeah. Cool.
There's one right at the back.
Hi Brian, my name is Michael. My question is very specific to my own startup. So currently I'm at a stage where, with the funding that we've received from the government and my own, we can push it to a stage where we can get past development into the market. So I'm at a stage now where we can do that with the money that we have, but it will be tight. Do I throw money in myself and go all in, or do I wait? Because I don't want to sell equity at this stage, because I truly believe that we have the fundamental team that can get it right, and we seem to be following the processes that are paying off. What is your suggestion? Because at the moment you cannot convince angels that your business is worth what you think it is worth, even at a post $1 million valuation.
Sure.
What do you suggest I do?
I'm very biased. I have a very simple stance on this. It's always better to spend other people's money than your own. That's how other people get rich, my friend. So I also, valuation-wise, I know your situation might be unique, and we can talk about this offline, but I will tell everyone here, we might all be afraid of dilution, right? We're like, oh my god, I don't want to sell too much of the company, da-da-da. But at the end of the day, dilution doesn't mean fuck all until you actually sell the company, until there's a liquidity event. So it's all in your head. It's all this funny money thing. Yeah, you can sell 80% of your fucking company, but you rather own 20% of a billion-dollar company or 100% of a $100 company, right? You have to recognize that that's what you're going for. And good investors will recognize that if they buy a majority of your company early on, you will lose motivation, and you can use that against them. Like, why do you want to buy so much? Like, I don't have any skin in the game anymore. I don't want to build anything. Like, oh yeah, you're right. Oh shit. So you want to make sure they understand that you need to still be motivated, and that's how they will orient their investment philosophy around how they fund you.
Okay. So do you suggest that with the money that we have now, we take it to market because we can get user feedback and get users on without getting them on?
We'll use it as a threat.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Basically, again, like you tell the investors, like, I could either launch this and get a lot of fucking customers and look awesome and be 5 times more expensive, or you can give me some money now.
Is it a mistake to do that?
No, of course not. Like I said.
To just launch regardless.
It's a really good question. It doesn't hurt either way, because guess what? Let's say you launch and it failed. You can say, oh, it was just a beta. It was a test. We were just seeing how the customers would respond. You always have an excuse, my friend. Try not to be so like, this is it. This is the fucking thing, right? Always call it a beta. That's how you can always recoil from such shit that doesn't work. So just make sure you always give yourself optionality, my friend.
Cool. Back.
Hi, you mentioned that business is all about power, and I find that power is kind of like one of those things that like leadership and culture, and everyone talks about it, but no one says specifically what it means to be powerful. So I'm curious what the components are that you consider make someone powerful and how you develop them.
I think fundamentally power comes from your relationships and your optionality. So there are things that even if you had money, you couldn't get, and the only way you get it is by knowing the right person and making sure that person believes in you and wants to follow through for you. Your reputation precedes you. It's definitely one of those things that you recognize over time, and power comes from that. So I think making sure you establish that is very important. And by the way, your reputation comes from your personal brand and from your execution track record. I think that's really important. And honestly, power also comes from instilling fear. I know this sounds a little too Machiavellian, but the idea of fear is less so, oh my God, I'm gonna kill you. It's more about this person could be awesome and they could be amazing, and I'm fearful that I might not be a part of that. So if you are able to show them that you're so excited, super passionate, they are just afraid that if they don't back you, they'll miss out on it. So it is that fear of missing out. So that's also a big way to establish power when you really have nothing, is to be that chess player that can kind of sort of, you know, head fake people into thinking that you actually are very, very aware of what you're doing.
We've got time for a couple more, I think.
Hey man, I'm Rab. I'm one of the co-founders of a startup that's working in ad tech upstairs with Eva of the space. I haven't been rejected today, so I thought I'd give it a go.
No, you can't ask your question. There you go.
No, all good. Depending on how long you're here for, you can go grab a beer and talk about ad tech and connecting, I guess, some of the ecosystem. We're not the only ad tech company in New Zealand and in the ecosystem, but connecting some of the dots across to where you guys are.
Well, guess my email address, and maybe we'll get beers. But tonight I'm going to K-Row, by the way. I'm thinking about it. I've heard it's really fun there. In the best ways possible. You know. I will be out and about in Ponsonby area tonight after dinner, so if you guys want to come out. But yeah, just shoot me a note.
Sweet. Cool, one more.
So as you scaled, what did you find was most successful at getting alignment across your people?
Yeah, it's actually awesome. I think you can't get full alignment from everyone. It's just not possible. But those who do are who you keep. It's a great filter. And I think you do owe it to them, though, to sit down with everyone individually even to explain where you're going. One thing I actually do that I think you guys can borrow in some form is every new year I write something called the painted picture. And it's not actually a picture at all. It's just a lot of words. It's an essay essentially. And what it is it's my vision of what the year is going to look like that I send to everyone in the business. And so again, if you have 100 people in the company, it's hard to sit down with every person. But if you write something in your words that is like a little dialogue of you saying, hey, so I believe, 2017 was shit. And for us, it was shit. It was an awful year. And I go, 2018 is the year for us to shine. Back to basics, blah, 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 blah. I wrote it all up. I can actually send you what our painted picture was for this year so you can actually see the format. But it's a great way for you to create alignment very early on, because what happens is everyone goes, oh, Brian wrote this in his painted picture. There's these 4 or 5 things he mentioned as themes, and we have to align to that. And people will go, yeah, I agree with that. Or some of them might disagree. And if they do, you can discuss this healthy with them because at least you have it written down. So I recommend that you all attempt to write that down, because you can be the most verbal, most bombastic, charismatic founder in so far as your explanation to them as in an all hands at the beginning of the year, but if you don't write it down, they don't have something to refer to all year round. And I think that's one way to create alignment, is to do that painted picture.
Awesome. All right, I think that is us for tonight.
Who gets the book?
Oh yeah, so
What was the best question?
because she asked like 5 fucking questions. Asian power.
Time to wrap it up. Just a couple of thank yous. First of all, Startup Grind is part of this global community. We've got some big global partners, Google for Entrepreneurs and Comcast. Local sponsors, Pixel Fusion and Shane, super excited again. And also partners, Grid Auckland, Pendle and Garage Project. I think it would be awesome. Greg, can you just stand up and can everyone please give a round of applause for Greg for creating this please linger and hang around and don't be a stranger and keep coming and attend and help and support. So thank you. Thank you again, Brian. This is cool. This has been fun. I encourage wine trips before every startup grind because it makes the interview fun and asking anything. Yeah, that's it. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you got some gems out of there. You may have a little bit of time before you run away for your dinner date. So we will use that time and then see you guys later. Thank you to Tech Week as well. Make sure you get out this week and attend heaps of stuff, get lots of inspiration. And come and hang out. But thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.